It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. Tonight we have a guest returning, Thomas Johnson, T.H.Johnson. And we had him on because he had written a couple of books and a movie, Pursuit of Exhibit 35 in the O.J. Simpson murder trial and its hidden secrets, and also a video that he did, Serpents Rising, an independent investigation of the O.J. Simpson murder trial. Now, we had Thomas on a little over a year ago, and me and Thomas got to talking and went on about 6 hours. As a matter of fact, when I reminded him tonight it was 6 hours, he was a little shocked at how long it was. But that show, we just re-uploaded it to the Ed Opperman YouTube channel, and we got so much response again. And during that conversation, we had talked about Geronimo Pratt. So I said, everyone said, hey, invite him back and have him talk about Geronimo Pratt. So that's what we did. Thomas, are you there?
I'm here. And I want to thank you for inviting me to come back on. I'm very, very surprised that you tell me we were going for 6 hours. That just seems unbelievable. I certainly didn't have a plan to go beyond the 2 that I think you told me we would be doing. But nevertheless, you know, you can get in. This subject is so fascinating that you can just go on for hours and hours. So I'm glad you invited me back. Ask your questions.
Well, tell us about yourself first. Who is T.H. Johnson? How'd you get involved in all this?
Well, my role is, by title, Investigative Team Coordinator for the Ocean Medical Investigative Group. And this organization was created by my brother as well as myself. I guess I encouraged him to do so back either in the latter part of 1996 or the early part of 1997. My brother is a medical doctor in Los Angeles, California, Dr. Henry S. Johnson. And as many of us, he had been interested in the O.J. Simpson murder trial, and it was in between the end of the criminal trial and right before the beginning of the civil trial, which he was in his office, and, you know, they were continuing to promulgate the Simpson aftermath of the Simpson trial, and my brother was heard to say by a patient in his office, you know, I wish I could examine the autopsy reports on Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman. And the person who heard him say that was very surprised and just happened to be an individual who worked at the coroner's office. And so a few days later, these manila envelopes wind up on my brother's desk. And when he finished with his patient load that evening, he sat down and went through the autopsy reports. And a few days later, he called me at my office in Minneapolis, and he said, Tommy, you know, I've gone through these autopsy reports, and based upon what I reviewed from the doctor's explanation of his in the autopsy protocols, these people were not killed in the manner of the testimony that was given in O.J. Simpson's trial. And so with that, my brother went through an extensive, let's say, breakdown of what the original Dr. Irwin Golden had stated, and another one of his patients, who was a lawyer that had been on CNBC Geraldo's program, I think his name was McNeil, he had an association with the civil attorneys of Simpson, and I think they were Baker and Blazer or something like that. And so I remember I was out in California at the time, and my brother invited me to come to the luncheon and just listen to how it would go. And I went to the luncheon meeting at the outdoor restaurant in Santa Monica. And when we ended, he asked me, what did I think of it? And I said, well, I feel that these guys, for all intent and purposes, are pipe and slipper attorneys. I don't see them being as aggressive as the lawyers in the criminal trial. And I said, and I do not think that they're going to call you to testify at all based upon your newfound discoveries. And certainly they did not. In essence, what I said to him came to pass. But they did call someone to present his interpretation. And that individual that they called was the doctor, the forensic pathologist that testified for the defense in the criminal trial. Do you remember his name? I can't remember his name off.
Was it Cyril Wecht or Bodden, one of those?
I think it's Michael Bodden.
Michael Bodden,
wasn't it?
yeah.
Yeah. So they called Michael Bodden to testify. And what my brother had concluded, based upon examining the forensic pathologist, Dr. Irwin Golden's measurements of the exit wounds, was that there were two distinctive types of knives involved, one being a single-edged knife, the other being a double-edged knife. And my brother's conclusion, based upon the direction of the exit wounds and the 4 stab wounds underneath Nicole Brown Simpson's left ear, with the sharp edge of the single-edged knife pointing over her shoulder and the dull edge of the knife pointing eyes forward, that the most likely assailant that attacked her was a left-handed assailant. As far as Ron Goldman's wounds were concerned, he appeared to at some point was simultaneously attacked by 2 individuals, one wielding a double-edged knife or dagger where he was struck 23 to 24 times to the right side of his face and neck. Those were basically superficial wounds. They didn't go in deep enough to do any major damage. But one of the fatal wounds, my brother concluded, to the right side of his torso that went into his rib cage and nicked the bottom of his aorta, causing internal bleeding. He concluded that based upon the direction of the knife exit wound, that wound was delivered by a left-hander wielding a single-edged knife, thrusting it into the right side rib cage of Ron Goldman. So, with that said, that in essence became the beginning of what I told my brother at the time. I said, if you want to be heard, you're going to have to establish a foundation of your own. In other words, a platform of your own. And you're going to have to go from there. If you intend on delivering your findings to other people and they doing justice with them, I wouldn't put much hope into that. And so I guess he accepted that. And when I got back to Minneapolis, he called me a couple of weeks later and told me what he planned to do. And then he says, and you're going to be responsible for the investigative department, you know. And I guess my brother knows how I am, and I figured, okay, we're going to bump heads, but he selected me, and you know, maybe he knows that I'm going to watch his back, you know. So I decided that I was willing to take on the responsibility of investigative team coordinator, but I told him, and it has always been a general rule, I said that if I take on this position, in regard to evidence, no one and nothing will be given the privilege of presumption. And that's the way it's been. Now, that rule has caused a great deal of acrimony, even internally within our organization, because I've let people go at the end of the day that have come back after claiming that they've done their due diligence and said to me, well, I didn't do this or I didn't do that because I assumed this. And when they said that they assumed that evidence was this way or that way, I did just like Donald Trump. I said, you're fired. You know, you can leave. And so that's the way it's gone. And I mean, even he and I have had some heated arguments at some time. You know, in fact, I used to, when I would travel back and forth, because I would be in Los Angeles almost every week back during the 90s and so forth, as we were deeply involved in this investigation. I used to stay at my brother's residence, but I think this thing becomes so intense, at least with both of us and with several of our investigators as well, that he decided the next time that I came out there, he had a motel room waiting for me. So that's the way it's been. I mean, when I visit Los Angeles now, I usually stay at hotels and so forth, you know, and sometimes that's in the best interest to keep peace in the family. But I love my brother very much, and I'll go to the wall for him, even though we disagree sometimes on certain things. But he knows that I'm there to look out for his back as he's there to look out for mine.
Well, let me ask you this, because you've devoted a huge portion of your life to this work. Who is funding this work? It's coming out of your own pocket?
I didn't hear you. Say it again.
Who is funding all this work? It's coming out of your own pocket?
Yeah, well, we've self-funded it. Yeah. You know, my brother's had the capacity to provide for the needs of the organization and so forth, but I think we've all, and certainly I've been very, very cost-effective, cost-efficient in terms of everything that we do. And I think the difference between us and others is that we focus on doing our due diligence. And I think that other people who get concerned about how much money is being spent here or there, many of these people are people that get paid high salaries, but when you put them to the test and ask them, did they do their due diligence, these are the people that come back and tell you, well, I just assumed that such and such a thing was this way. And you tell them, well, go back. We don't take assumptions. Go back and find out. Then they want to get mad because, you know, that's time consuming. So, yeah, you know, it does cost, but we're cost effective. And I'm a very frugal individual because I make certain demands that you do your due diligence. And there's no excuses in terms of it. So in the end, I think that we're satisfied in terms of whatever amount of money that's been spent. And we have spent a lot of money relative to this matter. But I don't think, you know, it may not be to other people as what it is to us. You know, we take this thing personal. And I've expressed this with a number of people, including O.J. Simpson, you know, and told him that as far as I'm concerned, he's become the metaphor for the destruction of the African-American male in this country. So don't get it twisted. If I'm visiting with you, I'm not here as a fan or groupie of yours, because if you're waiting for me to be a groupie, by this time next year, you'll be standing around wearing nothing but a straw hat to cover yourself with. This is about business. And when I'm here to take care of business. Every minute of the day counts as far as we're concerned.
You know, one thing I want to point out before we get too far off the subject is because you mentioned the autopsy and your brother's examination of the autopsy report and his willingness to testify as well. But one thing that I found so important in your work, and I read your book and I watched the video, and I'm very impressed, by the way, with the thoroughness of both. It's incredibly well documented and very thorough investigative work. But one thing that really struck me was that the prosecution never put on the actual medical examiner that performed the actual autopsy. They had a spokesperson from the office testify instead, which is, I've never heard of that before in my life.
Well, it is as confusing to us as it is to you. And the way that came about in my documentary was that after my brother had an anatomical skeleton hanging in his office, and one evening when I flew into Los Angeles, instead of going to our favorite restaurant or wherever our favorite watering hole in Los Angeles, we went directly to his office that evening. And he pulled out,